Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another Chill Subs Ask Me Anything event. Tonight, we have the pleasure of speaking with Jennifer Acker from The Common, and I'm really excited to ask her your questions. As always, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. And there are some of you that asked some questions when they registered for the event, and we're always really grateful for those. So we'll start with those, and then as you put questions in, we'll get them answered. Jennifer Acker is a writer, editor, and translator. She's the founder and editor in chief of the global award winning literary magazine, The Common. Her debut novel, The Limits of the World, was a finalist for the Massachusetts Book Award. Her memoir, Fatigue, is a #1 Amazon bestseller, and her short stories, essays, translations, and reviews have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Oprah Daily, The Washington Post, Literary Hub, N+1, Slate, and Poets and Writers, among other places. Acker has an MFA from the Bennington Writing Seminars and a BA from Amherst College, where she directs the Literary Publishing Internship and Lit Fest. She lives in Western Massachusetts and Portland, Maine, and her second novel, Surrender, just came out in April. Welcome, Jennifer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you. Congratulations on your second book coming out. That must be really exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been wonderful. Yeah, I've really enjoyed the tour and getting reader feedback and all of the wonderful things that come out. When you get to talk about your work, which is really a privilege.
Have you always been a writer?
Yes. I have always written things, which is maybe a little different than, considering yourself a writer. I think it takes a while to sort of have the courage to apply that label to yourself. And so, maybe it wasn't even until my first book came out that I really thought, aha, like I am a writer. But no, I did always write things. I wrote lots of poetry as an elementary school kid and short stories but I knew I always loved the process of writing. Like I always loved words. I even, I played the piano, I wrote some songs, just like so that process of composing and writing has always been a part of my life.
How did you know that you wanted to go into it as a career, working as an editor and getting your MFA and working at a university now? Was there a sort of moment or a path that led you there?
I mean, I think for the first long while, I just thought I just want to write. Or it's not that I didn't want to do other things. It's that I didn't know what you could do apart from writing. I didn't know what editor jobs were like. It sort of became clear to me, at some point in college, because you take writing classes in college, but you don't take editing classes. Like you don't, or at least my school didn't offer them. And so, I didn't know what you could do. But I would just sort of take any opportunity that I could find. Like in college, I worked for a newspaper, and so gradually by taking various jobs and internships, I got a better sense of the lay of the land, and sort of got the sense like, oh yeah, so you can work in this world, and we can work as an editor, and I discovered that not only did I really enjoy writing, but I liked giving feedback. And that was something that I discovered in writing workshops, is that, that's a staple of the workshop, is that you're giving feedback to other people. And I discovered that I really enjoyed that. And that was something, it felt very gratifying when I could contribute something that would make a light bulb go off in someone else's head. And so that really sort of spurred me down this sort of, I think every publishing career is kind of haphazard, but, it sent me down this relatively haphazard path of becoming an editor.
Do you still find that you give a lot of feedback as an editor on the submissions that you get?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's an editor's job, is to, I mean, yes, you're choosing pieces for publication, but, especially at the Common, we accept pieces very much based on potential rather than polish. And so pieces do not have to be done, but they have to show strengths, originality, great writing. Obviously, there are lots of things that that we look for, but definitely part of my job is conveying to writers how I'm reading their piece. How is it coming across to me? What do I think it's about? What are the moments where I think it slows down, or are the moments where I get particularly engaged? And so that is, yeah, very fundamental to what I do.
I think that's really lovely that you do that. I think it's surprising how infrequently maybe that does happen in the world of literary submissions. A lot of times it's either a yes or a no. They'll just kind of take it in their current state, and every once in a while, you work with an editor who really wants to work with a piece.
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
What do you think makes for great writing? What do you look for?
When we read submissions for the Common, I mean, because the Common's mission is to publish works with a strong sense of place, that's obviously one element that is important to us. But once you sort of establish that, it meets that criteria, we're looking to be, immediately engaged, looking to be drawn in, looking for a kind of confidence and authoritativeness in the voice, like when you enter a piece of fiction, or any piece of prose, any piece of writing, you want to feel like you're in really solid hands. You want to feel like this is an author who's going to guide us through an experience in a very sure way. Um, and so, that can come across in a lot of different ways, but um, I think, clarity often shows us that a writer knows what they're doing, and that, the writer feels confident about the material and about the style or the voice that they've adopted. Um, and so, I definitely look to be, drawn in to understand the world pretty quickly, and to understand the world more and more deeply the further I go into the story.
Yeah. I'm really interested in your mission to connect with pieces of writing based on a sense of place, or select pieces that have a sense of place. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, I think the obvious way is naming the place where something takes place, but that's not the
Mhm.
only way to establish a sense of
Yeah.
place, right?
Yeah. I think sort of the operative word in that phrase is sense. And so we're really thinking about the sensory details. We're thinking, how is this place conveyed? And in order to really render a place fully, like, you need all of the senses. You need not just sight, but sound and taste and touch and smell, and all of those senses are what make us feel grounded and make us um, be able to feel embodied, like, to feel like we're there. And I think that's something that we all want when we're reading, is to be transported. And you really do that through the sensory details. But the other thing that happens when you're developing a sense of place is that those there is emotion connected to the physicality. And so, I think, one thing that I often say is that a space becomes a place when there is experience or emotion connected to it. So there are spaces all around us. We always are occupying space. We're physical human beings. We have bodies. So we're always in space. But what makes it a place is some emotional reaction to it. This place makes me nervous. This place makes me happy. I recognize this place makes me think of something else. This place makes me hungry. Like, all of those things.
I think that it's kind of common advice for writers to give to other writers, where they maybe discourage naming where something takes place so that the reader can feel like it's happening anywhere, where it might be happening right down the street from them. Do you think that that's good advice? Do you think naming a setting is important in a story?
I think a name matters so much. I think what matters more is that the place is fully fleshed out, right? That the place is sort of embodied or and described in the way that we were just talking about. Um, in my second novel that just came out, it's sort of I live in Western Mass, and it's set in Western Mass, and so there are all of the it's a fictional town set in with all sorts of real landmarks surrounding it. And so, I very much wanted to write about this place and wanted to touch on the various things that are special about this place and that people would recognize. But I didn't want my neighbors to get mad if I got something wrong about our particular town. And so, I fictionalized like the town, and I gave it a name, but it didn't have to have a name, right? Like it could have. I think for the course of a whole novel, if you don't give a place a name, it could be a little tricky. But in the space of a short story or an essay or poem, I don't think it has to have a name, but we have to know where we are as readers.
Yeah. I have a special place in my heart for stories that, are set in a fictional setting or poetry collections that are set in a fictional setting.
Mm,
For example, Deaf Republic comes to mind, the poetry collection. And
mhm,
so, um, I think there's something kind of allegorical about that. And it leads the audience to suspend disbelief or just to trust you to take them wherever you want them to go in this
mhm,
fiction, very real place. Um,
yeah.
so your mission at the Common is to publish work with a distinct sense of place. Does that carry over into your own personal writing? You mentioned that that was the case in the second novel. Is that the case with the first novel too? And are they similar?
The novels are very different. My first novel, um, was takes place like largely in Massachusetts, but also in Nairobi, some in India. And so it followed the immigration story of an Indian family that migrated from India to East Africa to the United States, sort of based loosely on my husband's family. And so that wasn't autobiographical, but it was sort of biographical, like, sort of borrowing and embellishing and, someone else's story, which was really interesting and a lot of fun, but involved a lot of research. Um, but the places, of course, are very important. I think, particularly when you're writing an immigration story, that element of displacement and what makes places similar or what makes places the same, different, or what's startling or new about various places. Those details are really important. Um, and then for the second novel, this one was in terms of the storyline is not autobiographical, but the setting is. Like I grew up in a small town in Maine. I mentioned that I live in Western Massachusetts, also in a small town. And so I really wanted to, I sort of wrote this very global novel for my first novel. And then the second one is like, I want to write about a small town. I want to write about a place where everybody knows each other and they know each other's business and there's lots of gossip and there's quirky characters. Um, and I really enjoyed that. So I definitely need to know where something takes place before I can start writing it.
Yeah, I think there's something really interesting you just touched on where there's sort of it gets to the sense of belonging and foreignness and I think that's something that we all, struggle with, especially in this very digital world where we're kind of disembodied when we talk to people. So,
Yeah. That was very much the impetus for starting the Common in the first place, was thinking, I started thinking about it in 2008, 2009, right around the time, I mean, of course we'd had the internet for a while now, but like really blossoming into digital subcultures, into smartphones, into all these different kinds of connectivity, and it made me kind of anxious, all of that. And so I wanted to really think about physicality and think about groundedness, but also those themes that you mentioned, home and away, belonging. All of those things seem to be increasingly fraught in our digital world. And so that was the reason for developing a magazine that focuses on sense of place.
I love that. And I really can't think of a lot of magazines that do, which is interesting because it's so central to our identities. There's a question in the chat. Eileen is wondering if the story moves from place to place, should each setting be distinctly described?
I think so. I mean, it sort of depends on what your interest is or like what your goals are for that story. I think, if the but I don't see how it could hurt. I think it could sort of only make the story richer to sort of, fully flesh out those different places because there seems like there's got to be a reason why the story is moving from place to place. Um, it's not happenstance, like you as the author are deliberately moving the characters around or moving the story around for a particular reason. And so I think having those places be distinctive would not only make it come alive, but would shed some light on the character and the storyline as well.
Yeah. Jay says setting is usually my favorite character in my favorite.
Yeah, no, it's so wonderful. I mean, I love that experience when you read and that the feelings and the images and the other senses of that place stay with you long after the book is over. So even if I can't remember much about a book that I read some time ago, or I can't remember what happened or the title or the characters' names, usually I have some sort of like image of it, and it's not just an image, there's sort of like a mood attached to it also.
Yeah. I imagine that probably happens to you a lot with the submissions that you get.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. Sometimes I read a piece and maybe we don't accept it, but I can still sort of conjure that sort of environmental element. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that actually. That's a great description of how to depict a sense of place is sort of you're conjuring it with your words.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your review process when submissions come in? Like, do you review with a team? Do you have genre editors that make the decisions, or do they go all through one person? Do you have readers?
Yeah, I think some of all of the above. So we, like so many magazines, we use Submittable as our platform. So we're getting things electronically, and all everything gets assigned to our volunteer readers. And each piece has to be read at least twice and usually three times before it gets sent on to an editor. And we do have section editors. We have a poetry editor, and then the prose is sort of split a little bit. Like there are a couple of editors who um, focus mostly on nonfiction, and then a couple and then the managing editor and I focus largely on fiction. And then we have someone else who reads and edits fiction with us. So it's sort of a team effort. Like there definitely is a team of people who are making final decisions and who are also weighing in on edits. Um, but usually, we look at the reviews of the readers and their comments. And then before anything is rejected, an editor will read it. So editors are the only people who reject things. They're not being rejected by interns. They're not being rejected by volunteer readers. Therefore, the editors are the ones who accept things also. So when we get to that point, we often sort of pass things around. Maybe we'll have an official discussion about it, like an editorial meeting, or sometimes we'll do it by email and consult a little more individually, sort of depending on the piece and what kind of time we have and things like that.
How do you feel about hybrid work?
Sure. Yeah, we publish lots of hybrid work. There's one editor in particular who I often show the hybrid work for because she has more of an eye for that, and writes some of it herself. But yeah, certainly we've published many a poetic piece of prose or a prosy poem, and pieces that are nonfiction but read like fiction, or even fiction that read like essays. I don't know if it's not exactly hybrid, I suppose, in terms of the melding of genres, but in terms of the tone of it, I think stories that read like essays are very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that there's a lot more autofiction these days than maybe there used to be. Uh,
Mhm.
and I don't know if you get a lot of people that write under pen names or pseudonyms.
A few. Yeah, I can think of, I don't know, but really a small handful, a small handful of people who we've published over the years, who write under pen names. Yeah.
How do you handle differences of opinion on in the editor's room? So does one opinion sort of sway the others? Does it have to be unanimous for you to accept a piece?
No, I think we give each other a lot of freedom so that if someone on the team really loves something and I don't hate it, then then I'm happy for that editor to to work on it and bring it to life and publish it. I don't have to love everything that we publish. I think that would probably make for a much more boring magazine if we were just following my tastes all the time. I think that, that's why you have a number of editors, so you get different voices and different perspectives, and I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want to be the final voice on literally everything. Um, so yeah, so I think, we often have a discussion about it, and it's really just sort of, and we end up sort of saying, is this a piece that you feel like you know how to edit? Like, this is a piece that speaks to you in a way that you know how to work with the author on it. Like, if there are things that you don't love about it or that you think could be strengthened in some way, um, no, do you feel like you want to go forward with that? And it's really led very individually by the editors. So an editor say, I really love this piece. I want to take it on. And if everyone sort of says, yeah, I like the piece, but I wouldn't really know what to do with it, or there are parts that I love, but I don't really see it in the magazine, or if everyone is sort of lukewarm and there's no one who wants to take ownership over it, then we'll give it a pass.
What advice would you have for writers to increase their chances of success with getting a piece accepted by the Common?
Yeah. The easiest column to break into at the Common is called dispatches. And that we sort of describe that as being short evocations of particular places. So
Mm.
it's very placey. So if you are like a placey person and you visit someplace extraordinary, or you have something to say about your hometown, or just there's some place that really catches your imagination some way, like this column is for you. um, and yeah, and those pieces they can be poems also. So they're either nonfiction, so they're either essays or they're poems. And we do, both genres. And for prose, they're pretty short. I would say between like 800 and 1,000 words, is generally how long they are. But, we love that, as editors, we love these pieces. Like, I love reading the dispatches. They're always so, they transport you somewhere immediately. You have this like wonderful snapshot, and then you're out. It's like, it's a beautiful, um, short reading experience. So I would definitely encourage people to submit there. And also, if you are an essay writer, um, we get fewer essay submissions than we do stories. So short stories are the most competitive. I think that's true at a lot of magazines, but we definitely see it on our end. So if you have any inclination towards nonfiction, especially if you have some like placey topic, or you enjoy, reporting things, we don't, it's not like, we're not a newspaper, so we're not going to be fact checking. So if you need an editor who fact checks, don't send it to us. But if you think there's something, there's some reported element, I really love that in essays, and it really makes pieces stand out. Either some researched element or reported element, I think is a great way to distinguish your piece.
Are there some places that come up over and over again that you get a lot of stories about?
I mean, New York City is, there, which is, I like reading about New York, but that's probably the most common because there are a lot of writers there and there are a lot of readers there, and that makes sense. Um, Other than that, no, I don't think so. I mean, like people's, childhood homes make a lot of appearances, or your grandparents' houses, things like that, places that are very rich with emotion and nostalgia. But again, those are not bad things. I never mind reading about someone's grandparents' house if it's, well done, if it's really evocative and there's a really good reason that we're there.
Yeah. Um, sorry. Is there any type of work that you'd like to see more of or themes you'd like to see more of?
Um, no, not particularly. I mean, I like to be surprised. And I like to and so, if you are able to, deliver a storyline or a character or a setting that is unusual, that's only to your benefit. If you can render that place and all its specificity and all of its weirdness and intrigue, I definitely want to read about that.
Yeah. Um, I think it's interesting because our childhood home is, no matter where it is in itself a place, and it comes up so often in writing. So for everybody at home that writes about their childhood home, this might be a really good place to send that over to. So, let's see. There are a couple other questions, and you all at home feel free to keep putting questions in the chat. Um, do you have advice for simultaneous submissions? In particular, how to choose which magazine to send your work to?
I mean, you definitely should do simultaneous submissions if journals allow them because magazines are slow, including the Common, and I'm really sorry, but we are a little slow. Um, and and that is because we are really reading your pieces and we are really editing pieces. And so, we have a good excuse, but I understand that it's frustrating. I'm a submitter too, so I, I know what it's like to be on the other side of that. Um, but yeah, I think in terms of where you want to be published, I think, you want to identify what your dream magazines are and start there. And then, if those, if your piece, doesn't make it to one of those places, then you try other magazines. I mean, I think that the tiered strategy is pretty common and not a bad way to go. Um, I think it's hard to I mean, I think there probably are some websites that tell you how fast or slow people are, um, or how fast or slow magazines are in their response times. And so if you really want a quick response, you could, send it to a magazine that's going to get back to you faster. And that's perfectly legitimate too. Sometimes you just feel like, I want to know. I want to know whether somebody wants this piece or not. Um, but I think that the tiered strategy is the slowest, but probably the most satisfying in the end.
Yeah, it can be really hard to coordinate sending to the slower magazines and then the faster,
Mhm.
because sometimes if you're too quick to send to the faster magazines, you'll never hear back from the slower ones because you're always withdrawing your work
Right.
from considerations.
Right, right. Yeah, no, it's quite challenging. I would think that's why it's good to I mean, I think it's good to submit to a lot of different places at once. If you are lucky enough to be fairly prolific, then you can send out, different stories to different places or different, I think, poets have the advantage in this way because you tend to have multiple poems, at once that you are trying to place. Um, and sometimes a magazine will say like, well, I'll take these two. And then another magazine will say like, well, I'll take these other two. Um, but yeah, unfortunately, it is just sort of a messy submission landscape. It would be nice if it were better coordinated.
Yeah. And I suppose if people didn't want to deal with the messy submission landscape, they could always go one at a time, but it would be very
Yeah,
slow.
it would
Yeah.
be very slow. Yeah.
Um, You talked about being prolific and having a large volume of work to send out. Do you have a process for carving out time for writing? Everyone sort of has their own um, writing rituals and flow. Do you want to share a little bit about yours?
Yeah, I think, with a with a job that is in literature, a job that I love that is in literature, it can be hard to sort of shut off the editorial brain and then, and then do my own writing. And so while, maybe I used to be a person many years ago who wrote sort of every morning or as many mornings as possible, I find that really challenging now. I'm also just a person who needs a lot of sleep. So I can't get up early and I can't go to bed late. So that means that most of my writing is done on the weekends or on some kind of vacation or break. And so my job, because the Common is based at a college and we work with a lot of student interns, that is sort of the rhythm of the magazine is that we're busiest during the semester. And then we have a winter break, we have a summer break, Thanksgiving break. And those are the times that we editors used to write.
Okay. Is that how you wrote your novels as well?
Yes, it is.
How long did
Yep.
it take you to write your first novel?
Um, from beginning, from starting it to publication was 10 years.
Okay.
I think I sold it after, around year 8, but then it takes a while for it to come out. So that was a very long process. That was like, many, many drafts. It took time looking for an agent and then finding a publisher and, all of those things. So that was very like, and now I know a lot of people for whom that's true. Like sometimes a book takes 10 years. um, I didn't want every book to take 10 years. As you get older, your time starts to get a little bit shorter. And so my second novel, from start to finish was 4 years.
Okay. And isn't there something called the 10-year book club for writers?
I think there is. Yeah, I don't know what kind of badge you get or something, or like, they send you a bottle of champagne when you're done or something. I don't know. But yeah, it is a club. It is a thing.
We have little badges on Chill Subs for different things, for using the submission tracker, for playing rejection bingo. I think that we should add that badge.
Yeah,
I'll talk to
I
our
like it.
yeah. Uh, so, did you know what the book was about when you first started writing it, or did it change in that first 10-year process?
The first book, that I know what it was about?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I had a pretty clear vision of it, of some version of the storyline and the characters. But within that, a book can, is kind of a shapeshifter and like it can change over time. And especially when you write something over a long period of time, you find yourself like you have to rewrite the parts that you wrote many years ago to sort of catch up with your current sensibility, and like the person that you are now and the brain that you have now and the things about writing that you know now. So that's part of the work of writing something over such a long period of time is sort of constantly reaching back and bringing things up to speed or bringing things up to the current moment. But, it was a first book. It was also, I wasn't writing constantly for those 10 years. Like I got my MFA. I was working full time. I got married. I moved houses, like I took different jobs. Like, all of those life happens, right? Um and so there were long stretches when I wasn't working on the book, or when I thought I just need to give it a rest or I need a fresh pair of eyes. I'm going to give it to some friends. And so there are, all of these different processes that go into it.
I'm really interested in what you said about the earlier parts of the book needing to catch up with the current sensibilities. And it sounds like, maybe, like, the earlier voice needs to come up to the later voice? Did you feel like your voice shifted in that process? Or did you always just sort of have it and, it didn't change?
No, there definitely were things that changed. Like I had the first book is called The Limits of the World, and it's multiple points of view. Um, and I ended up, so I subtracted a point of view at one point, so that point of view was, what was no longer in the book, and then I added points of view, and then there were sort of these interstitial chapters, that was like a historic point of view told in the first person plural, but I didn't figure that out, the first person plural bit, until I'd been writing for several years. And so that sort of changed the structure of the book. But also, I think, as writers, you're always going to want to write, and revising is writing. And so if you get, the more that you reread those passages, the more that they get worked over. And if it's been a while since you've seen something, maybe it will seem perfect, but maybe you think, no, I know better now how to show that element of this character, and I'm going to try something different. And I think, part of that is a fallacy that we are better now than we used to be, but you also kind of have to believe that you're getting better over time. Otherwise, what are we doing?
No, that's true. Yeah. Um, yeah, there's so much about the book publishing process that I think is really interesting, because you're just sort of you're putting together this beautiful piece of art, and then you have to sell somebody on it. Um, how did the book translate into being published? Did it take a long time to find an agent and then a publisher, or did you query
It
a lot?
did. Yeah, it took a long time to find an agent. It took a while to find a publisher for the first book. And so part of that process was also like getting feedback from editors who were not quite ready to take it and wanted to see certain kinds of revisions. And so then, I ended up revising for those editors who then didn't take the book. So then I had gone in a particular direction, based on, some editors' feedback, which was not bad or wrong. It was just, sort of a different direction. Like every editor is going to have a different vision for the book. And so the more people who you make contact with and are, revising sort of, with their comments in mind, it's going to take you in a different direction. And so that was part of the lengthy process, was sort of doing that iterative process of multiple revisions sort of going in different directions, I guess.
Yeah. It's really interesting because a lot of times the going advice is to write with the reader in mind and to know the literary landscape and the publishing market and what types of genres are popular or which are oversaturated. Do you think that's important when you're writing a book, or is there something else more internal that motivates the story that you tell?
I think you want to know what kind of book you want to write. Do you want to write, a hybrid memoir just like X book, or do you want to write a thriller just like Y book? I think for yourself, it's important to have some parameters. Otherwise, you'll never make any decisions. And you'll just, sort of can be stuck spinning your wheels for a long time. But beyond that, I think it's very tricky to write for a particular audience or a particular editor or a particular publishing house. It's and I think you do want to be a little more self-guided in terms of your own desires, in part because publishing is incredibly unpredictable, and you want to be engaged and satisfied with your own process. And if you're not, there's really no point. Like that, so much of, yeah, I mean, There can be glory on the other side of publishing. There can be silence. We've all, we're going to experience both, over the course of our careers, I think. And so making sure that that you're engaged in your own process and that it's achieving, you're writing the kind of book that you want to write is the most important thing.
Yeah. Um, I think that there's a lot of silence when you publish work, whether it's in a lit mag or with a book. Sometimes you just don't get a lot of feedback. Do you have any
Yeah.
advice for others on how to sit with that?
Yeah, I mean, something that I thought about a lot while I'm doing my book tour, for the most recent novel, Surrender, because the book reviews landscape has basically been decimated, right? So there are so few reviews. So, maybe it used to be that, even if you were being reviewed in smaller venues, you were still getting someone's, thoughts on a page or a website, um, about, a considered point of view about your book. And that's very gratifying.
Mhm.
And so many review outlets have dried up that, what I have found is that the kind of the feedback that you get, or for me, came from events on my book tour, like from the conversations that I had with other writers. And so so through the tours, there would be at least one person in the room, the person, my conversation partner, who had read the book and was asking me questions about it. And that was the way that I could sort of glean what people thought about it. Like otherwise, there just aren't a lot of opportunities for that because of the lack of reviews. Which, there are a lot of efforts to try to change that, including at the Common. If you are interested in writing book reviews, I'm doing a little plug now. We are
Mhm.
greatly expanding our book reviews section. So you should check out the book reviews page, on our website if that's something that interests you. We pay real money for real book reviews, and we're very excited. So this is going to be like our little contribution towards, re-enlivening the reviews landscape. Um, but, because it really is a problem. It's not just a problem for authors. Like, you can say like, "Oh, woe is me, authors don't get feedback about their pieces," but, reviews are really for readers. And not all readers are writers, so you want to provide a way for, people to know what's out there and to have some guide towards things that they might like.
What do you think has contributed to the decimation of the book review genre category? Where'd they
I
all
mean, I
go?
can I can only say what, what is that the people who now own newspapers, only care about money. And they think that clicks are directly related to money, which it's got to be true in some part, but it's not the whole truth. That I think people read newspapers and magazines for different reasons. Um, and, you always want to catch the reader who came for the sports page and ends up, buying, reading a review about a novel. And you've sort of eliminated that possibility now. But there is just, a very, there's just the mindset. I think newspapers are not really, where most of the reviews used to be, are not really considered public goods anymore. They're considered things that make money for private equity or for billionaires, or maybe, which is maybe the same thing. Um, and so, people just have a very narrow mindset about what book reviews should be, that they should be driving traffic in some sense, whereas really, you want reviews to start conversations. You want
Yeah.
reviews to illuminate culture. You want reviews to, to make people think and to broaden horizons. And, as we know, not all culture makes money, and criticism is a part of culture.
So if you just published a book or your book is about to be released, maybe is a good time to try to get reviews. How would somebody in today's landscape go about getting their book reviewed?
I mean, you need to be familiar with. I mean, you need to read reviews and know what magazines are publishing reviews. And so that means looking at smaller magazines, literary magazines. It also means looking at regional and local papers and magazines. I would think, sometimes the last bastion of these reviews are your community paper, your local paper. And that's certainly true in our area, that there are, a lot of like small but mighty local publications who are still doing those things. Um, and then you want to, get your elevator pitch down, craft your pitch, and, try to make the case for why that particular publication would be interested in your book. And is it because like that's your hometown, or because, that publication, their readers are mostly people who go fishing and your book is about fishing, like there some connection.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of writers who kind of they love to read, right? That's a thing that writers have in common. And sometimes they get a little bit blocked on what to write about or even overwhelmed. They have so many ideas, they don't know what to write about first. And I think that it's really easy to underestimate the art of the book review. It can be a mini
Mhm.
essay in its own way. I love writing book reviews, and I think one of the reasons that I enjoy it so much is because you get to connect why the book matters, right? Like what
Yeah.
it says about the world. Um, and it's a conversation that you get to have with other readers through the review. And so everybody at home that maybe isn't sure what to write about, please go review somebody's book and send it to the Common or to some other lit mag and get it published because it's good literary citizenship. And it's so important to talk about each other's work when it goes out there.
Yeah. And it's very satisfying. I always find writing book reviews very satisfying. Like you think you know what a book is about, or you think you know what you think about it, and then you sit down to write about it, and it really forces you to think harder about it. And I think it eventually, and pay attention to the book in a way that you don't if you're not writing about it. And so I think it makes you a better writer also.
Yeah, it really like it's a self-paced course in a way.
Yeah.
I think that we have a lot of emphasis on self-promotion in this digital age of having, a social media following and, sort of doing your own marketing, which is important. But maybe, there can be a little bit more emphasis on doing that for each other in a sincere way, right? Not just because it makes money or drives clicks.
Yeah.
So, do you have any thoughts on, using social media to promote your work? Like, you just went on a book tour. Is having a social media platform important to your success as an author?
I enjoyed it. I was not on Instagram for a long time. I've been on Facebook for a long time, but I don't particularly enjoy it as a platform. I don't really know why. Um but I certainly still use it, and it's great, especially for keeping up with like childhood friends and family. And I'm sure people on here are like seeing pictures of their far flung grandchildren, and and your cousin who lives in Indiana, or um, but I think I do find Instagram to be a very supportive environment. Sort of literary Instagram is its own corner. And there is a lot of love and support there, for authors, for among authors, for other authors. And I really think that's nice. I really enjoy it. And so, um, you know, I think publishing a book is very anxiety producing. It can feel very lonely. Even though you might have an audience at the event, but after the event, you're in your hotel room by yourself, or you're driving to the next thing on your own. And so there is something that makes you feel a little less lonely about sharing those things. Not that I think social media actually alleviates loneliness. Like in the big picture, I'm sure it does the opposite. Um, but for books in particular, yeah, does it make a difference in sales? I have no idea. But is it sort of an enjoyable community to be a part of? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Um, do you have any suggestions for getting a chapbook published?
Ooh, like a poetry chapbook?
Sure, or
Um,
it's not entirely uncommon for there to be, like, short story chapbooks as well.
yeah. Do I have any I mean, I think contests, right? I mean, I are the way that most chapbooks, get published. I've never written a chapbook, nor have I edited them, so I'm not super knowledgeable about this particular, field, but certainly I've had friends who have. And I think that, you just the nice thing about chapbooks is that you're often able to find a really nice match between your work and the publisher. And I think that's sort of the most important thing is that you want to find a publisher who's doing things that you really admire. And, this is your opportunity to be in a relationship with an editor, to have, make a connection with the press and with the press's readers. And so finding that sort of mutual admiration, I think is probably the most important part.
Yeah, for sure. We only have 9 minutes left, and so, this has been such a lovely chat. If anybody has questions at home that we didn't cover yet, please feel free to put them in. I have just a couple more left. Do you, um, have any suggestions for writers who wanna publish nonfiction
In general,
in general, or
um,
a book or in journals?
yeah, I mean, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, for submissions wise, we get many fewer essay submissions than fiction submissions, and so I think literary magazines are a great place to try for your essays. In terms of publishing collections, I think it's nice to publish. I think it's a sort of the same advice for a short story collection probably is that, publishing individual pieces in magazines make it more attractive for both agents and editors because they know that there's, other people have already said yes to some elements of it. Um, and so I think that's very useful. Um, you know, for n- it sort of depends on what kind of nonfiction you're doing. I mean, for us at the Common, we get a lot of personal essays, which I love. I love personal essays. Um, but I always, that personal arc has to be really strong. And there also has to be some other element, usually like something else that's sort of bubbling up through the surface, whether it's investigating a place or whether it's like looking at a relationship dynamic or looking at something historical or some other phenomenon. I think you really up the reader's interest if you're combining those two elements.
Okay, that's really good advice. Um, what about suggestions for getting paid for your writing?
Well, um I mean, many magazines pay but not a lot. um if it is really important to you, and I would say it is very hard to make a living as a writer. And so most of us have other jobs, right? I would not make a living as a writer. I have a job as an editor. Um, and so there are, very, very small percentage of writers who don't have other jobs, who are making a living. So then I think you just, you want to decide whether how important that is for you if you have um, do you want to be recognized with an honorarium for your writing? Is that crucial? And for some people it is, and I don't begrudge that at all. I think that you should only submit to places that pay. Um, there aren't a lot of places that pay a lot. Probably you know the New Yorker, the Atlantic, like the big glossy magazines, are going to pay like what we would consider like a real sum of money, and everywhere else is going to pay a lot less than that, and it's sort of a range. So is it between, $200 and $500? That is a big difference, but it's not going to keep you afloat.
Yeah. There are some people who make, I don't know if it's an income or a side income, but answering pitch calls and writing for, I think a lot of times it's for, I see this for either the big glossy magazines or for Substack. Surprisingly, a lot of
Yeah.
people have Substack publications and they love to pay writers for opinion pieces and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I think, yeah, there are some, yeah, newspapers and magazines that will pay. Yes, Substack is a great option, to, but it's sort of like, what if your priority is making money for things that you write, you're going to approach it differently, and not necessarily badly, just differently. And so if you want to write, whatever, if you want to just follow your imagination and then figure out where you can publish it, that is not going to be a route probably towards making a lot of money. But if you do, even if you're like, I want to be a writer who gets paid for my pieces, that may determine the kinds of pieces that you write.
Yeah, for sure. Um, what about advice for people who want to start their own lit mag and especially how to fund it? Do you have any things that you'd like to share about that?
Yeah. So you have to be a little bit naive or a little bit delusional, I think, and very tenacious to start a magazine and to keep it going. And it's definitely a good idea to think about funding before you start. It doesn't mean you have to have all the funding, but you should have a plan. Like, are you going to be a nonprofit magazine that's completely reliant on donations? Are you going to try to find an angel investor and they're going to be your main source of support? Will you have a subscription model? What will you charge for? What will you not charge for? How much money do you actually need? Do you need to make a salary as as an editor? Are you going to do it as a volunteer? um, because literary magazines, are like toddlers and that they will take literally everything that you have. They'll take like every ounce of energy and, imagination and creativity and hard work and, sleepless nights that you want to give it. Um, and so, sort of thinking about where you want this publication to fit in your life. Is it going to be your full time thing or just something that you want to do with some friends? And both are very gratifying. But I think it's useful to know what your own goals are. And then, yeah, financing is like, there aren't that many ways to raise money. There's, you can charge people for services. You can raise money from donors. You can get subventions from institutions, and you can get grants. And
Yeah.
that's kind of it.
Yeah. Um, Thank you for outlining that so clearly. I think that's really helpful. And what do you think is the secret for some of those? There are some journals that have been going for over 100 years, and certainly a lot of them that have been around for decades. What do you think gives them so much longevity?
It depends, but I think a lot of those magazines are associated with, our prestige publications of educational institutions, colleges, and universities, and they may have an endowment.
Hmm.
And so, so that means that a long time ago, someone gave a big pot of money and you're living off of the interest. And so you're not actually raising the money year to year yourself, but your budget is provided um, by that endowment. So I think that's probably the secret to most. Other magazines that, or they have, a revenue model, but actually can't really think of any magazines that have, where people are really like paying a lot of money for the product. But like some magazines, either you have wealthy donors who back them, which is definitely one way to go. But donors can change their minds. They can die. And so it can be sort of hard to, I know, hitch your cart to one horse.
Yeah. I think also, there are some journals whose reputation really carries them through the ages and they kind of become timeless. I think the mission of the Common, where it's tied to a sense of place, is distinct enough and unique enough where I love reading the Common, and so I think,
Yeah.
a journal that gets a lot of readers will be a
Yeah,
win.
readers will help carry you through for sure, but readers also are a good way to convince donors to, to help the publication keep going. And readers and donors are often the same people. And so whether you're, a little donor or a big donor, your subscription, your donation really matters.
Yeah. Um, we just have we're at about time. Do you have any, parting words or a parting author you would like people to check out?
Oh. My favorite author is Shirley Hazard, who I think is underread, underknown. She was Australian, but she lived a lot of her life in New York. She lived in Naples too, and she was like a very global citizen. Spoke different languages, incredibly erudite, and wrote the most amazing love stories with the most chiseled, exquisite language.
Hmm. I think the world needs more love stories. So thank you. I'll definitely check her out. I also love how place was such a big part of your description of her. You could just
Yeah.
tell what you
Yeah, I
do.
mean, I so admired her. Yeah, she died about 15 years ago, maybe. But she was a really remarkable person. And I would love everyone to read her.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this, Jennifer. It's been such a pleasure having you on, and all the wisdom and insight that you shared has been really lovely. Thank you.
Well, thank you for everything that you do. It's a wonderful organization, and thank you for all the wonderful questions, and all of you for coming. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at the next one.
Bye.